The palace of the alien king was built from crystal and stone, shining like a mountain of light beneath the twin suns. Tall pillars rose high, and great windows opened to the endless sky. To the people of this world, it was the center of power, the heart of their pride, and the symbol of their strength. Yet inside its shining halls, not all was as perfect as it seemed. Princess Arya, the daughter of the alien king, often walked alone in the gardens at the back of the palace. She was known for her beauty, her soft silver hair, and her eyes that held the calm of a still lake. But despite her grace, she carried a sadness that only a few could see. Food had always been strange for her. The meals of her people were unlike those of other worlds. They were cold, heavy, and without flavor. Great dishes of glowing fruits and dark grains were brought to the royal table, yet to Arya they tasted of nothing. She ate because she must, but she never felt satisfied. Sometimes she felt a weakness in her chest, as though something important was missing. On this evening, when the suns were sinking low and the sky glowed in gold and red, Arya sat on a bench in the garden. Flowers with crystal petals bent toward her, but even their beauty could not lift her spirit. She touched her stomach and whispered that she was hungry, though the palace kitchens were full. Her heart longed not only for food but also for something new, something that could fill her in a way her people's meals never had. Yet she did not dare to speak of it aloud. To complain of the royal food was to insult the palace. And to insult the palace was to insult her father, the king. That same evening, the guards announced the arrival of visitors. A delegation had come from far across the stars, from a small world known as Earth. It was not the first time humans had entered the palace, for the king often welcomed traders and scholars, but this visit was different. Among them was a man named Tomas. Tomas was not dressed in fine clothes like the others. He wore a simple uniform, plain and neat, and carried a small pack at his side. Unlike many of the alien courtiers, he did not try to stand tall or proud. He moved with quiet steps, looking around with eyes full of curiosity. When Tomas was led into the garden by chance, Arya was still sitting alone. She did not rise, for she thought he would pass by without a word. But when his eyes met hers, he paused. He bowed his head politely and asked in a gentle voice, "Are you well, princess?" Arya hesitated. No one ever asked her that so directly. She answered with careful words, "I am well enough." But her voice betrayed a softness that made her weakness clear. Tomas studied her face and saw that she looked pale. "I do not wish to be rude," he said, "but you seem tired. Have you eaten today?" Her heart gave a small leap. No one had ever spoken to her about something so simple. She lowered her gaze and whispered, "I have eaten what was given, yet I feel as though I have not eaten at all." Tomas thought for a moment. Then he placed his pack on the stone bench and opened it carefully. From inside, he brought out small things wrapped in cloth and paper. There was bread, soft and golden. There were fruits, red and bright. And there was something sweet that glistened under the light. Arya leaned forward, her eyes wide with wonder. She had never seen such food before. The smell drifted through the air, warm and rich. She felt her stomach stir, not with duty but with desire. "What is this?" she asked softly. "This is food from Earth," Tomas replied. "It may not look like much, but it is made to give comfort as well as strength. Would you like to try?" The guards standing nearby stiffened. To them, it was unthinkable that the princess should touch the food of an outsider. Yet Arya ignored their frowns. She felt a strange trust toward this human who spoke so simply. She reached out her hand, and Tomas offered her a piece of bread. The moment she bit into it, her eyes widened. The bread was soft and full of flavor, unlike the heavy grains of her people. It filled her mouth with warmth, and she felt something stir deep inside her chest. For the first time in her life, she felt she was truly eating. "This is," she began, searching for words. "It is alive." Tomas smiled faintly. Food should bring life, not only to the body but also to the spirit. Arya took another bite, then another, forgetting herself in the moment. The fruit followed, juicy and sweet, leaving a stain on her lips. She laughed quietly, a sound rare in the halls of the palace. The guards watched in silence, unable to understand what they were seeing. When she finished, she looked at Tomas with shining eyes. "How is it that your world makes such food?" He shrugged. "We learned long ago that food is more than survival. It is memory, family, and joy. Every meal is a gift." Arya sat in silence, touched by his words. She realized that in all her years, no meal in the palace had ever been called a gift. They had been duties, ceremonies, symbols of power. Yet this bread, simple and plain, carried more meaning than all the golden dishes she had known. As the sun sank lower, casting long shadows across the garden, Arya felt a new warmth in her heart. She did not know why fate had brought this human to her at this hour, but she knew that something had begun. For the first time in many years, the hungry princess felt full. Not only her stomach but also her spirit had been fed. And though she did not say it aloud, she wished she could taste such food again. The garden of the palace had grown quiet after the sun set. The air was cool, carrying the soft scent of crystal flowers that opened only at night. Arya remained on the stone bench, her thoughts still on the strange food she had tasted. For the first time in her life, she had eaten something that felt alive, something that filled her with warmth instead of emptiness. She wondered if it had been a dream. But Tomas was still there. The human had not left after offering her the bread and fruit. Instead, he sat at a respectful distance, watching the garden with calm eyes. He did not speak unless spoken to, yet his silence was not heavy. It was the silence of someone who did not demand attention, but who was ready to listen. Arya looked at him more closely. He was not tall compared to the guards, nor did he wear shining armor. His face was simple, with dark hair and steady eyes. His uniform had no jewels, only a small emblem of earth on the shoulder. Yet there was something different about him. Unlike the courtiers who filled the palace halls with long speeches and praise, Tomas seemed content with simplicity. Finally, Arya broke the silence. "Why did you bring this food to me? You did not know I would be here." Tomas turned to her and spoke with honesty. "I carry it because it is a part of my home. Wherever I go, I bring a piece of earth with me. When I saw you, I thought perhaps you might like to taste it. Forgive me if I was bold." His words were plain, yet they touched her. No one in the palace ever acted without careful thought of rank and honor. Yet this human had offered her food not for gain but for kindness. "You were bold," Arya said softly, "but I do not dislike it." She remembered the taste again and almost smiled. But she quickly looked away, for she was the daughter of the king, and she was not meant to show weakness before outsiders. The guards shifted uneasily nearby. One of them stepped forward and said firmly, "Princess, the king will not be pleased to hear that you accepted food from this human." Arya raised her hand, stopping him. "He offered, and I accepted. You will not speak of this until I decide." The guard bowed his head but frowned, his loyalty torn between duty to the king and respect for the princess. Tomas, however, did not flinch. He simply nodded, as if ready to accept whatever punishment might follow. Arya studied him again. "Are all humans like you?" Tomas shook his head. No. Each of us is different. Some are strong, some are clever, some are foolish. I am only myself. She tilted her head slightly. And who are you, Tomas of Earth? He thought for a moment before answering. I am a traveler. I carry stories and memories of my world. I am not a soldier of rank or a leader of people. I am only one man who hopes to bring respect between our worlds. His answer puzzled her. Most who came to the palace sought power or trade. They spoke of ships, weapons, or riches. But Tomas spoke of respect. She wondered if this was the true nature of humans, or only his own. You speak as though respect is more important than power, she said. For me, it is, Tomas replied. Power may win battles, but respect builds peace. Without peace, food has no taste, and homes have no warmth. The words lingered in the cool night air. Arya had never heard such thoughts spoken so simply. Her people valued strength above all, for they believed it was the shield that protected their kingdom. Yet here was a man from a smaller world who claimed that peace gave meaning to life. She wanted to ask more, but her stomach reminded her of the food. She glanced at his pack and asked with curiosity, "What else do you carry in there?" Tomas opened it carefully again. Inside were more wrapped items. He took out a small piece of dried fruit, dark and sweet. He offered it to her, and she accepted without hesitation this time. The taste was different from the fresh fruit he had given before. It was richer, as though the sun of earth had been captured inside it. Arya closed her eyes while chewing. When she opened them, she saw Tomas watching her, not with pride, but with quiet satisfaction, as if he was glad simply to see her enjoy it. You share this so freely, she said. Do you not fear that I may mock it, or cast it aside? I do not fear that, Tomas answered. Food is meant to be shared. Even if you disliked it, the act of offering would still carry meaning. It is not wasted if it is given with an open hand. Arya leaned back against the bench, her thoughts deep. Never had she met someone who spoke so directly, without hidden purpose. She found herself wanting to hear more, though she could not explain why. A bell rang in the distance, calling the visitors back to the great hall. The guards stepped forward again, reminding Tomas that his presence was required. He rose to his feet, bowing low before her. Thank you for sharing your time with me, Princess, he said. May the rest of your evening bring peace. Arya watched him leave the garden with steady steps, his pack at his side. She felt a strange emptiness once he was gone, but it was not the same emptiness she had felt before. This time, it was the quiet ache of wanting something to return. The night grew darker, and the stars lit the sky. Arya sat alone once more, yet she no longer felt the same sadness. For the first time in many seasons, she had spoken freely with someone who did not treat her like a symbol or a prize. He had treated her like a person. As she rose and returned to the crystal halls, she thought of the taste of Earth's food, the warmth in Tomas's voice, and the way his eyes had held no judgment. She wondered if she would meet him again, and deep inside her heart, she hoped the answer was yes. The next morning, the palace was alive with noise. Courtiers hurried through the crystal halls, carrying messages and scrolls. Servants polished the shining floors until they gleamed like water. Everywhere, the news spread that humans had arrived in the kingdom, and the alien king himself would soon speak with them in the great throne room. Princess Arya listened to the whispers as she walked through the long corridors. Her mind, however, was not on politics or the king's council. It was still in the quiet garden, where the taste of bread and fruit lingered on her lips, and where a single human had spoken to her with gentle honesty. When she thought of Tomas, she felt a strange warmth rise within her. She could not understand it fully, for she had only met him once, yet something about him had left a mark. Perhaps it was the food. Perhaps it was the way he had spoken of respect and peace. Or perhaps it was the way he had looked at her, not as a princess on a pedestal but as a person sitting alone in a garden. That afternoon, Arya returned to the garden. She told herself she was only walking for fresh air, yet deep inside, she hoped she might see him again. The crystal flowers bent toward her as always, and the fountains sparkled in the sunlight. She sat on the same bench, her heart quietly waiting. Not long after, footsteps sounded on the stone path. She lifted her head, and there he was. Tomas entered with the same calm steps, his pack resting against his side. He bowed slightly when he saw her. "Princess," he said, "I did not think I would see you again so soon." "Nor did I," Arya replied, though a small smile touched her lips. "But perhaps the garden wished for company." Tomas took a seat a short distance from her, always careful not to appear too bold. For a moment, they sat in silence, listening to the soft trickle of water. Then Arya asked quietly, "Did you bring more of your food?" Tomas opened his pack. "I did. Would you like to try something different today?" Her eyes lit up with curiosity. "Yes. I would." He reached inside and drew out a small container. When he opened it, a sweet smell filled the air. Inside were pieces of fruit dipped in honey, golden and glistening. "This is simple," Tomas explained. "It is fruit touched with honey. On Earth, we share it during festivals or on days when families gather." Arya took one piece between her fingers and placed it on her tongue. The taste burst inside her mouth, sweet, bright, alive. She gasped softly, then laughed, a clear sound that echoed in the garden. "This is unlike anything I have ever tasted," she said. "It is as though the suns themselves melted into this fruit." Tomas smiled. "I am glad you enjoy it. On my world, children often run through fields to gather fruit for such treats. The honey comes from small creatures that work together to build hives. Each drop is the gift of their labor." Arya looked at the honey-coated fruit again, now with wonder. "Even the smallest creatures of your world can create something so precious." "Yes," Tomas said. "That is what makes Earth special. We find meaning in small things, for they remind us of life's sweetness." As she ate another piece, Arya felt her heart grow lighter. She had lived all her years in the palace, surrounded by jewels and treasures, yet none of those things had given her such joy as this simple taste. The guards watched from a distance once more, their expressions stern. One of them muttered, "It is dangerous for the princess to take so much from a human." But Arya ignored their whispers. Her focus was on the food, and on the man who shared it without pride or fear. "Tell me more of your world," Arya said. "What do your people eat when they are not celebrating?" Tomas thought for a moment. "We eat bread, vegetables, fruits, fish, and meat. Some meals are simple, some are grand. But the most important meals are not about what is on the table. They are about who sits beside us. Families and friends gather, and the act of sharing makes the food taste richer." Arya's eyes softened. "Here, meals are served to display wealth and power. They are eaten in silence or with speeches. Never with laughter. Never with stories." "Perhaps," Tomas said gently, "that is why they do not bring you comfort." His words struck her deeply. She realized he was right. All her life, she had been given food as a duty, never as a gift. Now, for the first time, she understood the difference. "Will you share more with me tomorrow?" she asked without thinking. Tomas bowed his head. If the king allows my presence, I will bring what I can. Arya looked at him carefully. And if the king does not allow? Tomas hesitated, then spoke with quiet honesty. Then I would still hope to share with you, for respect is not always found in halls of power. Sometimes it is found in gardens. Her heart stirred again. She knew the risk of angering her father, yet she could not stop herself from wanting more. The taste of Earth's food was more than flavor. It was freedom, warmth, and life itself. The suns began to set once more, casting golden light across the garden. Arya rose slowly, holding the memory of the honey fruit in her mouth. Before she left, she turned to Tomas. You have given me more than food, Tomas of Earth. You have given me joy. For that, I thank you. He bowed deeply. It is an honor, Princess. As she walked back through the palace halls, Arya's steps were lighter than before. She felt as though she carried a secret treasure, hidden not in her hands but in her heart. And she knew that tomorrow, when the suns rose again, she would return to the garden, hoping once more to taste the food of earth and the kindness of the human who brought it. The palace of the alien king was a place of strict order. Every step, every word, every gesture was weighed with meaning. For generations, traditions had shaped how the royal family lived. Nothing was done without purpose, and nothing outside their customs was welcomed. So when whispers reached the throne room that the princess had eaten food from a human visitor, the palace filled with unease. Nobles murmured behind their jeweled masks, servants repeated the tale in low voices, and guards shifted nervously in the corridors. What had begun in the quiet of the garden now echoed through the crystal halls. The alien king heard the whispers too. He was a tall figure, cloaked in silver and blue, his crown set with stones that glowed like fire. His voice carried the weight of command, and when he spoke, none dared to interrupt. That evening, after hearing enough rumors, he summoned Tomas to the throne room. The hall was vast, its ceiling so high it seemed to touch the sky. Rows of nobles stood along the sides, their robes glittering in the light of the crystal torches. At the far end, upon a throne carved from living stone, sat the king. His eyes were sharp, like blades, and his expression gave no sign of warmth. Tomas entered with calm steps. He carried his pack, though he knew it might cause offense. When he reached the center of the hall, he bowed low and waited. The king's voice echoed across the hall. Human, I hear you have given strange food to my daughter. Speak, and tell me why. Tomas lifted his head, meeting the king's gaze without fear. I offered it because I saw the princess was weary. She had eaten but was not satisfied. On my world, food is shared not only to feed the body but also to bring comfort. I wished to share a part of earth with her. A murmur rose among the nobles. Some looked shocked, others curious. Sharing food so freely was not their way. In their eyes, a gift was always tied to debt, and every act had hidden meaning. The king raised his hand, and the hall fell silent again. His eyes narrowed. Do you seek favor through this gift? Do you think to win her trust with simple bread and fruit? Tomas shook his head. No, king. I seek no power. I gave because giving was right. If she had refused, I would not have been offended. A gift loses its meaning when it is forced. I offered only with an open hand. The words hung in the air. Many nobles frowned, unable to understand such thinking. To them, gifts were tools of power. Yet the king studied Tomas with interest, though his face showed nothing. From behind the throne, Arya appeared. She had been listening from the shadows, her heart heavy with worry. She stepped forward, her silver hair glowing in the torchlight. "Father," she said, her voice steady, "the human speaks the truth. I asked for nothing. He offered freely, and I accepted. His food brought me strength where our meals brought only emptiness." The king looked at his daughter, his eyes softening for a moment before they grew stern again. "You are of royal blood. Your strength comes from discipline, not from foreign tastes. To take food from an outsider is to forget who you are." Arya lifted her chin. "No, father. To accept kindness is not weakness. It is wisdom. His food gave me more than flavor. It gave me joy, something I have not felt at the table of this palace for many seasons." The hall filled with shocked whispers. No one dared to speak so openly before the king. Yet Arya's voice did not tremble. She had found courage in the taste of earth itself. The king rose from his throne. His tall frame cast a long shadow across the floor. "If this food holds such power, then let it be tested. Human, you will present it before the court. If it proves worthy, perhaps I will listen. If not, you will leave this palace and never return." Tomas bowed. "I will do as you command." Arya's heart pounded. She knew her father was setting a trial that could end badly. The nobles would mock the simple food of earth. They would say it was plain and unfit for royalty. Yet she also knew the truth, in that plainness was a kind of beauty her people had never seen. That night, the palace buzzed with preparation. Servants whispered of the test. Some hoped to see the human fail. Others were secretly curious, for the story of the princess tasting his food had spread far and wide. In her chambers, Arya sat by the window, gazing at the twin moons. She thought of the bread, the fruit, and the honey Tomas had shared. None of it had glittered like jewels, yet it had filled her heart. She feared what might happen tomorrow, but a quiet voice inside her whispered that Tomas would not fail. His gift had already proven its worth to her. Meanwhile, Tomas sat in a small guest room with his pack open before him. He had little left to offer. The journey from Earth was long, and supplies were few. Yet he touched the bread with careful hands, as though it carried more than grain. It carried memory. He thought of fields on Earth, of families gathered around tables, of laughter and stories. He knew the nobles would not see this, but perhaps they would taste it. As the night passed, the palace prepared for the trial. The forbidden gift had now become the center of every whisper. Some said the human would be thrown out in shame. Others said the princess had already broken the walls of tradition by accepting his food. When the first light of the suns touched the palace towers, the great hall was filled once more. Nobles gathered, their eyes sharp with expectation. The king sat upon his throne, his gaze steady as stone. At his side stood Princess Arya, her heart racing, her hands folded to hide her trembling. Tomas entered the hall carrying a simple tray. No golden dishes, no jeweled cups, no glowing fruits. Only plain bread and fruit from earth. He set it upon the table before the throne and bowed. "This is my gift," he said. "It is not rich in appearance, but it carries the warmth of my world. Taste it, and judge not by the eyes but by the heart." The hall fell silent. All eyes turned to the king. He reached forward, took a piece of bread, and placed it in his mouth. The moment of judgment had begun. The great hall was silent as the alien king tasted the human bread. The nobles leaned forward, waiting for him to spit it out or declare it unworthy. Instead, the king chewed slowly, his face unreadable. Then he set the bread down and spoke in a firm voice. "It is plain," he said, "and without the colors of our feasts. Yet there is a strength in it, a weight that fills the stomach. It is not what I expected." The nobles exchanged uneasy looks. Some muttered that it was too simple for a king, while others whispered that perhaps simplicity carried its own power. The king lifted his hand for silence. "This food is not fit to replace the traditions of our people," he declared. "But it has shown me something. The human did not give this as a trick or as a weapon. He gave it freely, and my daughter accepted it freely. That alone has meaning." With those words, Tomas was allowed to stay in the palace. The king dismissed the nobles, and the hall emptied slowly, their whispers trailing behind them like shadows. When the hall was quiet, Arya approached Tomas. Her eyes shone with relief, though she spoke carefully. "You have passed my father's test, though he will not say it aloud. You should be proud." Tomas bowed. "I am only glad that no harm came to you because of what I offered. That was my only fear." Arya studied him for a moment. She wanted to tell him how much his food had meant to her, but the walls had ears. Instead, she gave him a small nod and said, "Meet me again in the garden when the suns fall. There we may speak more freely." That evening, when the palace had grown quieter, Arya slipped away from the grand halls. She walked quickly through the stone paths until she reached the garden where they had first met. The fountains glimmered in the fading light, and the flowers bent toward the last warmth of the suns. Tomas was already there, waiting with his pack at his side. When he saw her, he rose and bowed, but she motioned for him to sit. "You risk much by coming here so often," she said softly. "The nobles watch you with sharp eyes. If they find reason, they will drive you out." "Then I will give them no reason," Tomas replied calmly. "I come not for power, only to share what I have." Arya sat beside him on the bench, closer this time. The weight of the throne room had fallen from her shoulders, and here in the garden she allowed herself to breathe. She looked at him with a gentleness that surprised even her. "Your food has changed something in me," she admitted. "It is not only the taste. It is the way you give it. No one in this palace has ever offered me something without expecting something in return. But you simply give." Tomas's voice was quiet. "Because giving is its own reward. On earth, when families gather, no one asks for payment at the table. We share because we belong to one another." Arya closed her eyes for a moment, imagining such a world. She pictured families laughing together, children reaching for bread, elders telling stories by the fire. It was a world far from the cold halls of her father's palace. "Tell me more of these gatherings," she asked. "What stories are told?" So Tomas began to speak. He told her of old earth legends, of travelers who sailed across seas, of villages that came together to harvest grain, of mothers who sang to their children as they baked bread. His words painted pictures in the air, simple yet alive. Arya listened with her full heart. She could almost smell the fires he described, hear the laughter of children, and feel the warmth of homes built not from crystal but from love. When he finished, she said, "You carry more than food, Tomas. You carry a whole world inside you." He looked at her with steady eyes. "And you carry a whole world inside you too, princess. But perhaps no one has asked to see it." Her breath caught. No one had ever spoken to her like that. To her people, she was only the daughter of the king, a symbol of the throne. But Tomas saw her as something more. For the first time, she felt as though someone truly wished to know her. They sat in silence for a while, the sound of the fountains filling the air. Then Tomas opened his pack and brought out a small pouch. Inside were nuts, roasted and lightly salted. He offered them to her with a smile. Arya took one and tasted it. The crunch surprised her, and the flavor spread across her tongue. She laughed softly. Always, your food surprises me. Earth food is like life, Tomas said. Sometimes sweet, sometimes plain, sometimes sharp. But always it carries meaning. Arya looked at him, her smile fading into thought. I fear my father does not see this meaning. To him, food is power, and power must be guarded. Then perhaps, Tomas said gently, it is for you to remind him that food can also be peace. Her heart trembled at his words. Could she, the king's daughter, ever change such a heavy tradition? The thought seemed impossible. Yet as she sat beside Tomas, sharing roasted nuts under the light of the setting suns, she felt that even the smallest act could plant a seed. The evening grew darker, and the first stars lit the sky. Arya knew she must return before her absence was noticed. She rose slowly, reluctant to leave the peace of the garden. Before she walked away, she turned to Tomas and said, these meetings must remain our secret. If the nobles knew how often I meet you, they would twist it into poison for my father's ears. Tomas nodded. Then it will be our secret. I will come when you call, and leave when you ask. Arya held his gaze for a moment longer. I do not know why fate has brought you here, Tomas of Earth. But I feel as though it was not by chance. With that, she left the garden, her silver hair shining in the starlight. As she walked back through the cold halls of the palace, she carried with her the warmth of roasted nuts, the sound of Tomas's stories, and the quiet strength of a bond that no noble eye could see. It was a bond built not on power, but on kindness. A bond that would grow stronger with each secret meeting in the garden. And though she did not yet know where it would lead, Arya felt certain of one truth: the bond between herself and the human was now unbreakable. The palace was restless in the days that followed. Rumors spread among the nobles that the human carried strange secrets. Some claimed his food had hidden powers. Others whispered that he had come to charm the princess and weaken the throne. Though no proof existed, suspicion grew like fire beneath dry grass. One evening, during a grand feast, the alien king summoned Tomas before the court. The great hall shimmered with crystal lights, and long tables were covered in jeweled fruits and shining meats. Music played, but it faded as Tomas stepped forward under the gaze of 100 sharp eyes. The king's voice rose above the silence. Human, you have walked my halls freely. You have fed my daughter with your strange food, and you have passed the first test. But now, another trial must be faced. For trust is not built on one act alone. Tonight, you will prove your heart. Tomas bowed his head respectfully. I will do as you ask, your majesty. What is the trial? The king gestured, and guards brought forth a tray. On it lay a piece of alien fruit, bright green with a shimmering skin. Arya's eyes widened in alarm. She knew this fruit Silerin, a delicacy that was sweet to her people but dangerous to humans. One bite could bring a burning sickness to the veins. You will eat this fruit, the king said coldly. If you truly wish to be part of our world, you must take into yourself what we take into ours. Gasps filled the hall. Arya stepped forward, her voice trembling. Father, this is not fair. His body is not like ours. To eat this could harm him. The king's gaze hardened. Then let him refuse, and we shall know his limits. If he cannot share what we eat, how can we trust him to share our future? All eyes turned to Tomas. He stood still, his mind racing. Refusal would mark him as weak, perhaps even unworthy of staying near the princess. Yet to accept could mean his life. Arya's hands clenched at her sides. She could not speak further without drawing her father's wrath, but her eyes begged Tomas not to risk himself. Tomas breathed deeply and looked at the king. His voice was calm. Your Majesty, I do not fear your trial. But trust is not built on forcing one to risk death. Trust is built on respect. Allow me another way to show my loyalty. The king's brows drew together. Murmurs filled the hall again, nobles whispering whether this was courage or defiance. What way do you offer? The king demanded. Tomas reached into his pack and drew out a small, folded cloth. Inside lay a piece of dried earth fruit and apple slice, browned with age but preserved by careful drying. He held it up. This is food from my world, he said. It carries no bright colors, no powerful shine. Yet it has been kept safe through long travel. If you will eat of my fruit as I eat of yours, then we will share in trust, each taking into ourselves what is strange, yet offered freely. The hall grew silent. None had expected such boldness. The king studied Tomas with sharp eyes, weighing his words. At last, the king spoke. Very well. We shall see whose fruit carries the greater strength. The guards placed the green alien fruit before Tomas. With steady hands, he cut a small piece. His heart pounded, but he forced himself to place it on his tongue. At once, a burning fire spread in his mouth, running down his throat like liquid flame. He clenched his jaw and swallowed, fighting the sickness that rose in his veins. Arya bit her lip in fear, her nails digging into her palms. She wanted to rush forward, but she dared not. The king, without hesitation, took the apple slice Tomas offered. He bit into it. The taste was dry and simple, yet it carried a strange sweetness, faint but honest. His expression did not change, but he chewed and swallowed. Minutes passed. Tomas swayed slightly, his body trembling from the fruit's fire. The hall waited in silence, watching to see if he would fall. Finally, Tomas steadied himself and looked up. His voice was hoarse, but strong. I have taken your food into myself, your Majesty. And you have taken mine. May this be the beginning of trust between us. The hall erupted with voices, some in astonishment, others in disapproval. Arya rushed to his side, her eyes full of worry. You should not have done this, she whispered. It could have killed you. Tomas gave her a faint smile. Some things are worth the risk. The king raised his hand for silence. He studied Tomas for a long moment, then spoke. You have shown courage, human. Foolish courage, perhaps, but courage nonetheless. Few would face pain to prove loyalty. Tonight, you have earned more than suspicion. Arya breathed out in relief, though her heart still raced with fear for Tomas. The nobles bowed reluctantly. None could deny what they had seen. A bond of trust had been forged, though it came at a heavy price. Later that night, in the quiet of the garden, Arya tended to Tomas. She brought cool water and cloths to ease the fire in his veins. He sat weakly on the bench, his face pale but calm. You could have refused, she said softly. I would not have thought less of you. Tomas shook his head. If I had refused, your father would never see me as more than an outsider. Sometimes, to be accepted, one must carry another's burden, even if it hurts. Arya's eyes filled with tears she did not let fall. You risk too much for me. He looked at her with quiet strength. For you, princess, no risk feels too great. Her heart trembled at his words. She wanted to tell him how much his courage meant to her, but the words stuck in her throat. Instead, she sat beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. For the first time in her life, Arya felt safe not because of the guards or the palace walls, but because of a bond built in secret. A bond tested by fire. The stars above shone brighter than before, as if they too witnessed the silent promise that passed between them. Whatever trials lay ahead, Arya knew one truth with certainty: Tomas had proven his trust. And now, it was her turn to prove hers. The palace had grown quieter in the days after Tomas's trial. Whispers still flowed through the noble halls, but now those whispers carried a new tone, fear mixed with respect. The human had eaten the fruit of fire and lived. To some, he was foolish. To others, he was brave. Either way, none could deny that he had proven himself in a way no outsider had before. Arya watched the change closely. She saw how nobles no longer mocked Tomas openly, though suspicion lingered in their eyes. She also saw her father, the alien king, grow thoughtful and distant. He spoke little, but she knew he was weighing Tomas carefully, considering what his courage might mean for the throne. One evening, the king called his daughter to the throne room. The chamber glowed with the soft light of crystal torches. His voice was calm but heavy. "Arya, my daughter, you know why I called you here. The human has shown courage, but courage alone does not decide fate. He cannot remain by your side without consequence. Our people will not accept him easily. If he stays, division may grow. If he leaves, peace may return. Tell me, what is your heart's choice?" Arya's breath caught. She had known this question would come, yet her heart trembled hearing it aloud. "Father," she said, "he has brought me more than food. He has brought me truth. For the first time, I see kindness that expects nothing in return. I see a way of life beyond power and fear. If he leaves, I will lose that light. If he stays, I believe he may bring the same light to others." The king's eyes studied her deeply, searching for weakness, but her gaze did not falter. At last, he leaned back. "Very well. The human will have his chance. But know this: if he fails to unite, if his presence brings ruin, it will be you who bears the weight of the choice." Arya bowed her head, though her heart swelled with relief. She hurried to the garden, where Tomas waited, and told him what had passed. He listened in silence, then said softly, "Your father is wise. He sees both hope and danger. I cannot promise I will change all hearts, but I can promise I will never stop trying." That night, they sat beneath the stars once more, the air between them full of quiet understanding. The days that followed became a new trial for Tomas. The king allowed him to share his food with the people, but under watchful eyes. Some laughed at his simple bread, others tasted it with doubt, but a few began to return for more. They said it filled the stomach longer than crystal fruits, that it carried warmth instead of emptiness. One morning, Tomas baked bread in the palace courtyard, using small stones as an oven. The smell drifted through the air, drawing servants, guards, and even curious nobles. Arya stood nearby, helping him serve. For the first time, the princess's hands worked not with jewels or silks but with flour and dough. When the bread was ready, Tomas broke the first piece and gave it to Arya. She smiled and handed it to a servant, saying, "Today, we share not as princess and servant, but as one people." The act shocked many who watched. Yet slowly, others followed her example. Guards accepted bread beside servants, nobles tasted the food alongside commoners. For a brief moment, the divisions of the palace faded, replaced by the simple act of sharing. The king, watching from the balcony, saw it all. His stern face gave no sign of his thoughts, but inside his mind, something shifted. That evening, he called Tomas and Arya before him once more. "You have shown me a strange sight," the king said. "For a moment, our people stood as one. It was not power that bound them, nor fear, but food, plain, simple, human food. Perhaps there is more strength in this than I believed. Tomas bowed. Your Majesty, this is all I hope to show. When we share, we see one another not as enemies or rulers, but as people. The king's gaze turned to Arya. And you, my daughter, do you still stand by him? Her voice was clear. Yes, father. I believe his presence is not a danger but a chance. A chance for us to learn, to grow, to see beyond the walls of this palace. The hall was silent. At last, the king rose from his throne. His deep voice carried across the chamber. Then so it shall be. The human will stay, not as a servant, not as a prisoner, but as a guest of the throne. His food may be shared with the people, if they choose to take it. But remember, acceptance must be earned, not forced. Arya's eyes filled with joy. Tomas bowed deeply, gratitude shining in his heart. From that day forward, the palace began to change. Not overnight, not without struggle, but slowly, piece by piece. Servants no longer feared tasting earth bread. Guards spoke more kindly when Tomas passed. Even nobles, though still proud, began to see that their world did not crumble when they shared a meal with others. For Arya, the change was more than political. Each day she spent with Tomas, she learned more of Earth, its villages, its families, its simple joys. And each story made her dream of a life beyond cold halls and endless ceremonies. She dreamed of laughter around a fire, of walking through fields of grain, of living not as a symbol but as a person. For Tomas, the bond with Arya grew deeper. He saw her not as a princess trapped by duty, but as a soul longing for freedom. He promised himself that, no matter what trials came, he would stand by her side. One evening, as they walked through the garden where it all began, Arya spoke softly. Tomas, my father gave me a choice. And I chose you. Not only for myself, but for what I believe you bring to our people. Whatever path lies ahead, we will walk it together. Tomas looked at her, his eyes steady and full of warmth. Together, princess. Always together. Above them, the stars shone brighter than ever, as if blessing the bond between two worlds. And though challenges would still come, both Arya and Tomas knew that the seed of change had already been planted. A seed of trust, of courage, and of kindness. It was the beginning of a story that would be told for generations, the story of how a human, with nothing more than simple food and a giving heart, brought light to the daughter of an alien king, and through her, to an entire people.